you want to weigh on this one as well?
Well, I think it's very important that it's adequate to understand that somebody may be properly registered, but they didn't have the opportunity to be able to get their photo ID, or they happen to forget it the day they show up to vote. And so actually, the plan I support, which I went forward with, says that one, you can get a ballot that allows you to be able to vote, that says you don't have a photo ID, but you're able to sign your signature, and the local election official then takes that and does verify that you are who you say you are. And let's say, for instance, you forgot it, and you have the opportunity to be able to go home and get it, you'd be able to go ahead and fill out your ballot, and then you just show back up your local election official within the next 3 days to verify you are who you say you are. As well as anybody who was born before 1941, we would also ensure that they would have the opportunity to be able to vote without a photo ID, making sure we don't put any undue burden on a voter who may not have the opportunity to be able to have that photo ID, for example, because of a situation that they weren't expecting when they showed up to vote. And so it's always important that we protect every individual being able to have that opportunity to vote. And photo ID is certainly something that's very commonplace, as Senator Stouffer said. We understand that, but there are going to be instances where that person doesn't have it, and the plan I support ensures they get to vote exactly as they should be able to.
Okay, let's start with Senator Stouffer on this next one. The mics can kind of go back and forth. This election process, there have been a lot of petitions thrown around. I know for the tax reform proposal, there were like a dozen almost. Do you think the petition process is being misused, and do you think it should be changed at all?
Well, there's no question that it's being misused, and you know, citizens of Missouri reserved in the Constitution their right to have an issued petition, and it is the citizens' right to rebel against their government. But if you look at the petitions that have been run in Missouri, it's all been outside money. I can only think of maybe two that and I researched it, but only two that I can think of. One was Hancock, that probably came from the citizens of Missouri. But if you look at the Prop B, the puppy mill bill, or the term limits, unionization of home health care workers, the energy, all this stuff is coming from outside the state of Missouri and outside money. The problem is, how do you tighten that up without creating a bigger burden on those folks that actually live here in Missouri and have a legitimate beef? And it's tough to do, and I think it's something that we've looked at it every year I've been in the Senate. We haven't come up with a magic answer yet, but I do think that we need to do some things. I think there's one bill that was moved and it was supported by Farm Bureau and the Chamber. I've kind of lost track of it. I don't know whether it's been to the Senate or not, but it's Parsons' bill. But anyway, there would be a hearing after it was filed, so there could be some at least let people know what's in it. But I think what you have to have is a Secretary of State that will write clear and fair ballot language and allow the voters to make the decision.
Let's go with the same question about how this is being misused.
The initiative petition process is the people's final check on an out-of-control or an unresponsive government. And so it serves a huge, important role in the way our founding fathers, wanted us to be able to, control is another check and balance. So it is huge. It is something that is so important. Now, what it comes down to is that our democracy, our republic, we're always under attack by outside interest groups, by people that want to influence elections. You look at George Soros and how much he, plays into Secretary of State's races and things of that nature. So what it comes down to is that, I have a belief and trust in the people. And if you have clear ballot language and people who walk in and they know that if I vote this way, this is what it does, I'm always going to default to the people because I think they are smart, they love this country, and they're going to do a great job of pointing us in the right direction. And that is where the fair ballot language comes in. When you come in and you don't understand if I vote yes, does it really mean no, or does this really do what it says it's going to do? I mean, there's been initiative petitions where people, if they walked out and voted, like, oh, really? That's what I just voted on, when they find out what it really does. So again, you got to go back into believing in the people, but if you give them the basic information on this is what it does, they're going to make the right decision. And I think that's just what we have to do, is have fair ballot language, not someone that's pushing an agenda either from an out-of-state interest group or from anywhere.
Shane Schoeller, should the process be changed at all? Do you think it's being misused?
I think that it's probably inappropriate to say whether the process is misused by a particular entity. However, there can be more transparency, because I think it's important that the people know that who is behind it, what the purpose is they're behind the initiative for. And I think it's important that you do have language people can easily understand. That's why I moved forward with a plan called the Fair Ballot Commission, because I think it's important that any Secretary of State be willing to let themselves be held accountable. You know, the citizen initiative process starts by the people exactly as it should. The voters get to vote on it as a citizen initiative exactly as they should. But once it goes to Secretary of State, other than Secretary of State being elected by the people don't really have the proper say in how that ballot language is written. So I'm saying let's put together a group of people that would be volunteer for Republicans, for Democrats, and they would be able to look at that language, say, is it confusing, is it misleading, are there any issues, and let the people be involved actually in how the language is written. And if they believe it is, then they have an opportunity to be able to rewrite the language so that there are no politics played. Because when you look at the different issues that have been on the ballot, it's unfortunate that people walk away and not sure if their vote was a yes or if their vote was a no. And not only that, when you have politically charged terms, like the use of puppy mill. For example, we have a number of legitimate dog breeders where I'm from who take care of their animals exactly as they should. They would never condone animal cruelty to any type of animal. And so when you use that title, puppy mill, it absolutely influences a voter, that understanding that they're making a decision that affects every single dog breeder. And if you're in animal agriculture, that was an attack on you as a farmer in animal agriculture. And so we need to make sure that politics are left at the door, that you have someone who's going to make sure that they are watching out for how that ballot language is written. Because regardless of who Secretary of State is, we should always be willing to be held accountable. And that's one good way that I know we can be held more accountable than what the current Secretary of State is.
Shane Schoeller, we'll start with you on this one. The auditor Schweik, the Associated Press reported this morning that he's going to stop doing fiscal summaries on ballot initiatives for the foreseeable future. Do you think that's something the auditor should continue doing so voters know what these are going to cost? Just like the state legislature does. There's a fiscal summary attached to legislation.
I do think it was an appropriate role. I think we need to make sure that we move forward and making sure the auditor is involved to make sure that people know exactly if there are going to be any tax dollars spent, if there's going to be anything extra upon the citizens themselves. They need to be aware of that. So I think it was appropriate to have the voice of the auditor be involved. If it's not the auditor, then let's make sure that we have someone who makes sure that when taxpayers vote on any initiative, they know where their hard-earned tax dollars may be going if that's going to be part of the initiative that's going to be passed. If there's no tax dollars being used, then obviously that would not be something that you would have to address. But if there is, as taxpayers, I think we deserve the right to know, and I absolutely defend that.
Scott, what did you make of the auditor's announcement?
I was sad to hear that he was going to stop because this is one more piece of information that the voters need to know to help make a decision on what's best for their family in the future. Just in case you don't know what the issue is that every time we all put in a piece of legislation, there's someone that goes in that gets feedback from local communities, from school districts, and say, how will this affect you? They send information back, and then it's put out in a fiscal note that says this legislation, if passed, would cost local school districts nothing. It would cost the state of nothing. And we all know what is the real impact. So again, that's what he was doing. He was trying to give voters one more piece of information that on this ballot language, you're going to vote on something. Well, how do you know what it's going to affect your local school? How do you know it's going to affect this or higher education in Missouri? You don't know. So what he does is he gives that information, and I was sad to see that's one less piece of information people are going to have for this foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think somehow we need to be sure we know what the fiscal cost of petitions are. I mean, as Scott said, every bill that we pass through the legislature, we've got a fiscal note on, and as the bill changes, the fiscal note changes with it. It's unfortunate we can't use the same type of research, folks, but my understanding is the reason that is being written, ballot language is being written by the Secretary of State and the fiscal note by the auditor is because the Supreme Court said this is a function of the executive branch, not a function of the legislative branch. It's unfortunate we can't use those resources we have within the legislative branch, at least to do the fiscal notes. Maybe we can come up with a system where they do the research and then the auditor would please stamp of approval on or something. But citizens need to know before they vote on an issue what it's going to cost.
So do you think it should be switched back from the executive to the legislature?
No, I just say that we have the resources there already within government that's being paid. And if there was a way that he could use the resources of the legislative branch and then put the stamp of the executive branch on it, that may be a solution. But I don't know, but I think right now, if you had the legislative research folks do it, that the Supreme Court would declare it unconstitutional.
All right. Senator Rupp, a lot of your message has been focused on the business aspect of the Secretary of State's office. Part of what they handle is the securities regulations. Now, the securities, and that's where a lot of this financial crisis for is rooted. What kind of regulations would you get rid of, kind of mindful of that?
Yeah, well, first off, I would not say that we're in this issue because of the securities industry. You know, some of the things was because of mortgage bankers and things of that nature. The securities industry is your brokerage houses, your brokerage firms. These are your Edward Jones, your Wells Fargo. Missouri is the second largest state in the country for headquarters of brokerage firms. They employ almost 99,000 brokers across the country. So this is one of the few sectors that's actually added jobs in our state. And unfortunately, we're not going to go in and say we need to start repealing, regulations, because a lot of them are from the SEC and things of that nature. What we need to do is we need to say this is a viable industry that does a great job for people in saving for college and saving for your 401k and your retirement. And we need to have a Secretary of State that is not going to use them as a shakedown. Unfortunately, the current Secretary of State has treated this industry very poorly. She shut down a nationwide company for a whole day, had to get themselves opened back up by a court order. She's consistently fining brokerage firms. She shows up with a TV camera and a subpoena on their front door and never even called and said, hey, we've had a complaint. And then she asked them to make a donation into the Investors Protection Fund, which is a fund that then she turns around and uses to buy radio ads on the Cardinal games, the Chiefs games, the Rams games, the Royals games, talking about how she's protecting seniors. And if you look at the last 10 years, $15 million has flown into this fund, and almost $7 million was spent in 2010. And that just happened to be the same year that she was running for U.S. Senate. So again, it's if you just get someone in there that says, we're not going to treat this industry horribly, we're just going to be fair like we treat and regulate every other industry and not use it as a private slush fund, then you're going to see more jobs come to this state. That sector can continue to grow. So when people graduate and they can go out and they want to get into financial services, there's going to be a job and a viable industry for them to have applications in.
Schoeller, calling it Stouffer.
That's all right. So I think one area that we can make a difference for investors is in the smaller term investments. And matter of fact, I visit with folks, and right now, if you put together a business idea, business plan that's determined to be a good plan, right now, underneath the current security rules, you're restricted to a very small pool of people, mostly just close friends and family especially. And I think there's an opportunity for me visiting with people who've been in the regulatory industry in the past when it comes to securities to be able to open up that pool of investors to let them to be able to take a great idea, which is going to hopefully be able to bring more jobs and more innovation to a local community, and be able to let them be able to let more folks be involved in that investment. So I think that's one area that we can make a definite difference in. And I certainly have heard a number of stories from people, just like Senator Rupp said, I don't think any of us are unalike in this, and how we have a current Secretary of State who's playing gotcha regulatoryism. And she is, rather than trying to help people make sure they cross the T's and dot the I's correctly, the moment she finds the T's and I's crossed, then she's immediately thrown the book at them. And these are people who have been well respected in their communities, have worked hard to be able to build a reputation, a strong career, and it's gone overnight. And I'm not saying that there aren't many opportunities where she shut down a fraudulent investment practice. Absolutely, we know that's a part of that office, but I think there are probably some people who did not have the opportunity to be able to get their fair day and to be able to have an opportunity to be able to defend themselves as they should. And we want to make sure that we give every opportunity to, one, enforce the environment that people know that when they invest their hard-earned funds, that their money is going to be safeguarded. But two, that if you are a person who's out in the field and you have made a mistake, but not an intent to be able to impose fraud on somebody, then there's an opportunity to be able to work with them, that we do our best to be able to do that. And I think that's where you have to have someone who, it's almost like when you think about people with OSHA, how many times have you heard, on the workplace with OSHA, the number of regulations that have prohibited a good work environment going forward. And I think that's where we need to be careful in our securities environment too, that we have that environment, people know it's safe, but we also try to work with the investors to make sure they're well educated and know the environment in which they're trying to let people have the opportunity to be able to invest, and that they know the rules from day one and they don't get changed on